The world we know is a thin layer of dust resting upon a tomb of giants. If you were to stand in a quiet forest today and press your ear against the cool, damp earth, you might imagine you can hear the slow, rhythmic thrumming of a heart that stopped beating 150 million years ago. To understand the Jurassic is not to look at bones in a museum or to read cold numbers on a page. It is to feel the weight of an atmosphere so thick it clings to the skin like a wet shroud. It is to hear the groan of a continent breaking into pieces, a sound so deep it vibrates in the marrow of the bone rather than the ear. This was a time when the earth was breathing differently. The air was heavy with the scent of crushed pine needles, rotting ferns, and the metallic tang of salt spray blowing in from a sea that no longer exists. There was no ice at the poles. There were no white caps on the mountains. The world was a greenhouse, a lush, humid emerald suspended in the blackness of space, where life did not merely survive but overflowed with a violent, beautiful intensity. Imagine the transition from the world that came before. The Triassic had been a time of scorched earth, a vast and punishing desert where the land was red and the water was scarce. But as the clock of deep time ticked forward, the great supercontinent began to crack. The ground beneath the feet of the first small dinosaurs began to groan and pull apart. Great rifts opened in the crust, and from these wounds, the sea began to bleed into the interior of the land. This was the birth of the Jurassic. It was a baptism of rain. The dry, cracked plains were suddenly washed by storms that lasted for centuries. The red dust turned to rich, black mud. The heat remained, but the dryness vanished, replaced by a moisture that transformed the planet into a sprawling, endless garden. This is where our journey begins, in the shadow of trees that reached for the clouds and in the footprints of creatures so massive they reshaped the very topography of the continents. To walk through a Jurassic forest is to enter a world of green shadows and monumental scale. There are no flowers here. The vibrant colors we associate with nature, the reds of roses, the yellows of sunflowers, are entirely absent. Instead, the palette is one of infinite variations of moss, olive, and deep jade. The ground is a soft, springy carpet of decaying organic matter, several feet thick, muffling every footstep. Above, the canopy is dominated by conifers and ginkgos, their branches heavy with waxy, needle-like leaves that filter the sunlight into narrow, golden shafts. The air is still and stagnant, trapped beneath the ceiling of leaves. It smells of resin and ancient fermentation. In the gaps between the great trunks, ferns as large as houses unfurl their fronds, reaching out like skeletal hands to catch the moisture dripping from above. Everything is damp. A constant, low-level mist clings to the forest floor, swirling around the knees of anything that moves. The silence of this forest is not empty. It is a thick, expectant silence, broken only by the rhythmic drip of water hitting broad leaves and the occasional, distant crash of a falling branch. There are no birds singing in these trees. The ancestors of birds are here, but they are feathered shadows flitting through the undergrowth, their calls more like the rasps of insects or the clicks of stones. The true sound of the Jurassic is the sound of scale. When a wind moves through the canopy, it does not rustle. It roars. The trees are so large and their wood so dense that they sway with a slow, ponderous gravity. And beneath it all is the sound of the water. The Jurassic was a world defined by its rivers. Massive, slow-moving arteries of silt and snowmelt wound their way through the forests, carving deep channels into the soft earth. These rivers were the lifeblood of the giants, providing the hydration necessary to sustain bodies that weighed as much as a dozen modern elephants. As we move deeper into this ancient landscape, we encounter the first great paradox of the Jurassic. How could a world support such immense life? If you look at the skeletons found in the stone today, they seem impossible. A neck 20 feet long, a tail that could sweep across a forest clearing like a scythe, a heart the size of a small car. Modern science often looks at these creatures and tries to fit them into the boxes of the animals we know today, but the Jurassic defies our modern logic. The atmosphere was richer then, perhaps containing more oxygen or perhaps simply being more efficient at trapping the sun's energy. The plants grew with a speed that is difficult to comprehend. A forest cleared by a herd of feeding giants would grow back in a matter of years, not decades. The Earth was in a state of hyperdrive, a biological engine running at full throttle. Consider the weight of a single footprint. When a long-necked giant stepped into the soft mud of a riverbank, the pressure was enough to crack the underlying stone layers. We find these prints today, frozen in time, and they tell a story of a movement that was slow, deliberate, and unstoppable. There is a common misconception that these animals were clumsy or dim-witted, but their success suggests a perfect harmony with their environment. They were biological machines of incredible sophistication. Their bones were not solid, heavy masses. They were honeycombed with air pockets, a design that allowed for immense size without the penalty of crushing weight. They breathed through a system of air sacs that kept their blood oxygenated even as they exerted the massive force required to move. To watch them move through the Jurassic mist would have been like watching a mountain range slowly shift its position. The investigation of this era often leads to a sense of profound skepticism. Skeptics point to the sheer caloric requirement of such a life. How could an animal eat enough ferns to sustain a body of 50 tons? The answer lies in the trees themselves. The Jurassic was not just a time of big animals. It was a time of high-energy vegetation. The ferns and cycads were packed with starches. The giants did not chew their food as we do. They swallowed it whole, using stones in their stomachs to grind the fibrous plants into a pulp. They were walking fermentation vats, extracting every possible joule of energy from the greenery around them. This was a world of total consumption and total renewal. Nothing was wasted. Even the waste of these giants served to fertilize the soil, fueling the next explosion of growth. As the sun begins to set over the Jurassic horizon, the sky does not turn blue or pink. The heavy moisture and the volcanic dust in the air create a sunset of deep oranges and bruised purples. The temperature does not drop significantly. The heat of the day is trapped by the humidity, creating a night that is warm and breathless. It is in these twilight hours that the true mystery of the era reveals itself. The darkness is filled with the bioluminescence of fungi and the glowing trails of insects. The great herbivores do not stop moving. They are silhouettes against the stars, their long necks swaying like the masts of ships in a calm harbor. They are the guardians of a world that felt permanent, a world where the very idea of extinction would have seemed like a physical impossibility. But the earth is never still. Beneath the feet of the sleeping giants, the crust was continuing its slow, agonizing separation. The North Atlantic was beginning to unzip. Long, linear lakes formed in the center of the continent, the water growing deeper and saltier with each passing millennium. Volcanoes lined these rifts, their peaks glowing with a dull, constant red, adding their breath to the already thick atmosphere. This was a world in the process of becoming something else. The Jurassic was the middle act of a great drama, a period of transition where the old ways of the desert were being forgotten and the new ways of the flowering world had yet to arrive. It was a time of pure, unadulterated scale, where life had found the perfect set of conditions to push the boundaries of what was biologically possible. Let us sink deeper into the textures of this world. Feel the bark of a cycad. It is not smooth like a birch or rough like an oak. It is armored, covered in the hard, diamond-shaped scars of old leaves. Feels like cold, weathered bone. Press your hand into the moss at the base of the tree. It is thick and saturated, squeezing out a tea-colored liquid that smells of iron and old rain. Listen to the sound of a dragonfly the size of a hawk as it cuts through the air, its wings making a dry, papery rattle. This is the sensory reality of the forgotten Earth. It is not a fantasy. It is a memory written in the strata of the globe. The stakes of understanding this period are higher than simple curiosity. We live on a planet that has shown it can transform into a completely different version of itself. The Jurassic is a reminder that the normal state of Earth is not necessarily the one we occupy now. For most of its history, the Earth has been a world of heat, of high seas, and of giants. Our current age, with its ice caps and its small, fast-paced mammals, is the anomaly. By looking back into the Jurassic, we are looking at the Earth's true potential. We are seeing what happens when the brakes are taken off life, when the environment provides everything needed for a biological gold rush. As we move forward into the heart of this documentary, we will look closer at the paradoxes that define this era. We will examine the mystery of the oceans, where the water was so warm it felt like a bath and where reptiles the size of buses ruled the waves. We will look at the first flights, the moment when life broke free from the gravity of the soil and took to the heavy, humid air. And we will see how this golden age eventually began to fray at the edges, leading to the world that would follow. But for now, let the rhythm of the Jurassic rain settle over you. Feel the slow pulse of the planet. There is no rush. The stone does not hurry, and neither should we. In the deep basins of what is now the American West, the Jurassic was carving out a masterpiece of sediment and bone. Here, the rivers were vast and braided, constantly shifting their paths across wide floodplains. When a giant died, perhaps from age, perhaps from a flash flood, its body became a part of the landscape. The silt of the river would wash over it, sealing it away from the air and the scavengers. Over millions of years, the weight of the water and the earth above would turn that silt to stone and those bones to mineral. This process of geological erasure is the reason we have any record at all. It is a selective memory. We see the animals that lived near the water, the ones whose ends were met in the mud. But what of the ones that lived in the high mountains or the deep, dry interiors? They have vanished, their stories ground to dust by the wind. The Jurassic is a puzzle with most of its pieces missing. Yet the pieces we have are so vivid they allow us to reconstruct the whole with startling clarity. We see the tooth marks on a fossilized limb, telling us of a predator that moved with a terrifying, silent grace. We see the ripples preserved in a sandstone slab, telling us which way the wind was blowing on a Tuesday afternoon 148 million years ago. These details are the threads we use to weave the story of the forgotten Earth. They remind us that the past was not a series of static images, but a living, breathing reality as vibrant and complex as our own. As the night deepens in our Jurassic forest, the sound of the insects becomes a steady, hypnotic hum. The temperature remains steady, a comforting, heavy warmth that invites a state of rest. The giants have settled into their nocturnal rhythms. Some continue to browse, their movements ghostly in the dim starlight, while others huddle together for warmth and protection. In this world, size was the ultimate defense, but it was also a heavy burden. To be a giant was to be constantly at the mercy of the Earth's productivity. A single year of drought, a single shift in the river's course, could mean the end for 100 of these magnificent creatures. This vulnerability is the hidden tension of the Jurassic. It was a world built on a knife's edge of abundance. The very conditions that allowed for such growth, the heat, the moisture, the carbon-rich air, were the same conditions that made the ecosystem fragile. If the temperature rose just a few degrees too high, the plants would wither. If the rains failed to come, the rivers would vanish. We think of the Jurassic as a time of indestructible power, but it was, in many ways, the most delicate period in Earth's history. It was a grand experiment in the limits of life, a time when the planet pushed itself to see how much it could hold before the structure began to buckle. Stay with me in this moment. Let the atmosphere of this ancient world fill your senses. We are moving away from the shorelines now, heading into the vast, unexplored interiors of the continent. Here, the forests give way to open scrubland, where the wind has more room to run. The ground is harder, the plants more resilient. The giants here are different, smaller, faster, built for a world that is slightly less forgiving. The air is thinner. The scent of salt is gone, replaced by the smell of sun-baked earth and dry brush. This is the heart of the Jurassic, a place where the rules of the world were being written in real time. As we walk these dry plains, we can see the horizon, unbroken by buildings or roads. The sky is an immense, vaulted dome, crowded with stars that have long since moved to different positions in our modern sky. The Milky Way is a bright, solid band of white fire stretching from one end of the world to the other. There is no light pollution here, only the soft, natural glow of the cosmos. In this silence, you can almost hear the earth spinning. You can feel the rotation in the sway of the trees and the shift of the shadows. It is a reminder that we are passengers on a very old, very complex vessel, and the Jurassic was one of its most glorious voyages. The investigation continues. We look at the paradox of the wing. In the late Jurassic, a new shape appeared in the sky. It was not a pterosaur, those leathery-winged rulers of the air that had existed for millions of years. This was something different. It had feathers. It had claws. It had a long, bony tail. To the skeptics of the time, had there been any, this creature would have seemed an impossibility. How could a reptile grow feathers? Why would it need to fly when the ground was so rich? The rebuttal lies in the complexity of the Jurassic forest. The canopy was a world unto itself, a three-dimensional labyrinth where the ability to glide from branch to branch was a life-saving advantage. Feathers were not originally for flight. They were for warmth, for display, for protection. Flight was an accident of evolution, a beautiful byproduct of a world that was becoming increasingly crowded. This is the beauty of the Jurassic. It was a time of accidental masterpieces. The long necks of the sauropods, the armor of the stegosaurs, the feathers of the first birds, these were not planned. They were responses to a world that was constantly challenging its inhabitants to find new ways to exist. It was a world of anomalous engineering, where nature found solutions to problems we are only now beginning to understand. The more we look, the more we realize that the Jurassic was not a primitive time. It was an era of peak performance. As the first light of dawn begins to touch the tops of the highest ginkgos, we see the world wake up. The mists begin to rise, swirling into the air like smoke. The predators, who have spent the night in the shadows, begin to retreat, their bellies full or their hunts unsuccessful. The herbivores begin their long, slow trek toward the water. The cycle begins again, as it did every day for 55 million years. This is the endurance of the Jurassic. It was not a flash in the pan. It was a long, stable, and incredibly successful chapter in the story of life. We must remember that the stones we walk on today were once this mud. The mountains we climb were once these seafloors. The Jurassic is not gone. It is simply buried. It is the foundation upon which everything we know is built. When we burn coal or oil, we are burning the sunlight that was captured by Jurassic ferns. When we use plastic, we are using the remains of Jurassic plankton. We are intimately connected to this period, tied to it by the very energy that powers our modern world. To forget the Jurassic is to forget where we came from. So we stay here, in the half-light of an ancient morning, watching the giants move through the fog. We listen to the rhythm of their breath, a sound like the tide coming in over pebbles. We feel the warmth of the air and the dampness of the soil. We are witnesses to a time of wonder, a time when the earth was young and bold and unafraid of its own power. This is the forgotten earth, and its story is our story, written in the deep, silent language of the stones. As the sun climbs higher, the true scale of the Jurassic landscape is revealed. To the west, a range of volcanic mountains dominates the skyline, their peaks jagged and dark against the growing brightness. They are not the snow-capped giants of our era. Instead, they are active, living things, their slopes covered in gray ash and hardy, low-growing shrubs. From their craters, plumes of white steam and dark smoke drift lazily into the atmosphere, contributing to the greenhouse effect that keeps the world so warm. The ground near the base of these mountains is warm to the touch, heated by the magma that flows just a few miles beneath the surface. This is the engine of the Jurassic, the geothermal power that drives the movement of the continents and the chemistry of the air. In the valleys below, the rivers have swollen with the morning's rain. They carry a heavy load of sediment, turning the water the color of chocolate. These rivers are not just obstacles. They are highways. Large fish, some the size of a man and covered in thick, bony scales, move upstream to spawn. Along the banks, small, furry creatures, the first mammals, scurry through the roots of the trees. They are the size of rats with large eyes and nervous movements. They are the outsiders in this world of giants, living in the cracks and the shadows, waiting for their time to come. They feed on insects, on fallen fruit, and occasionally on the eggs of the dinosaurs. They are a reminder that even in the age of the giants, the seeds of the future were already planted. The Jurassic was also a time of great architectural change in the oceans. The Tethys Sea, a vast body of water that once separated the northern and southern lands, was becoming more complex. Coral reefs, more massive than anything we see today, were growing in the warm, shallow waters. These reefs were not made of the same corals we have now. They were built by different organisms, but they served the same purpose. They were the cities of the sea, providing shelter and food for a staggering variety of life. Ammonites, with their coiled, pearly shells, drifted through the water like underwater balloons, using gas-filled chambers to control their buoyancy. Above them, the great marine reptiles, plesiosaurs with their long, snake-like necks and ichthyosaurs that looked like predatory dolphins, patrolled the open ocean. The water of the Jurassic Ocean was different from our own. It was less salty in some places, more acidic in others. The chemistry was constantly shifting as the continents moved and the volcanoes erupted. But it was full of life. The base of the food chain was a thick soup of plankton, thriving in the warm, nutrient-rich water. This plankton was so abundant that it would often turn the sea a deep, reddish brown. When these organisms died, they sank to the bottom, forming thick layers of organic ooze. This ooze, over tens of millions of years, would be compressed and heated until it became the vast oil reserves that lie beneath the deserts of the Middle East and the floor of the North Sea today. The energy that drives our cars and heats our homes is, quite literally, the bottled sunshine of the Jurassic Sea. If you were to dive into these waters, you would find yourself in a world of muted blues and greens. The sunlight filters down through the plankton, creating a dim, ethereal light. The sound is a constant, low-frequency rumble, the sound of the distant volcanoes, the clicking of crustaceans, and the songs of the great reptiles. It is a world that feels both alien and strangely familiar. The laws of physics are the same, but the players are different. The scale is larger. The stakes are higher. The investigation of the marine Jurassic often hits a wall of skepticism regarding the survival of these air-breathing reptiles. How could an animal the size of a house survive in the open ocean without ever coming to land? The rebuttal is found in their remarkable adaptations. They did not lay eggs on beaches like modern sea turtles. They gave birth to live young in the water, a fact confirmed by fossils that show mothers in the very act of birthing. They were fully committed to the sea, their limbs transformed into powerful paddles, their bodies streamlined for speed. They were the masters of their domain, as unchallenged in the water as the sauropods were on the land. As we move back toward the shore, we see the interface between the land and the sea. The Jurassic coastline was a place of constant change. The sea levels were much higher than they are today, and large areas of the continents were covered by shallow epicontinental seas. This created a world of islands and archipelagos where evolution could experiment in isolation. On some of these islands, the giants became smaller, adapting to the limited resources. On others, new and strange forms of life appeared. The Jurassic was a laboratory of diversity, a time when the Earth was testing every possible variation on the theme of life. The textures of the coastline are sharp and salt-crusted. The rocks are often limestone, built from the shells of billions of tiny sea creatures. The air is thinner here, the humidity cut by the sea breeze. There is a smell of ozone and rotting seaweed. In the tide pools, strange, multi-legged creatures scuttle through the kelp, and small, primitive crabs hide in the crevices of the rocks. Above, the pterosaurs wheel in the wind, their shadows dancing over the waves. They are not like birds. Their flight is more deliberate, more like a glider than a hawk. They use the thermals rising from the warm land to stay aloft for hours, watching the water for the glint of a silver scale. This is the world of the Jurassic, a world of connection and complexity. Every part of it, from the deepest ocean trench to the highest volcanic peak, was linked in a great interlocking system. The rain that fell on the mountains flowed into the rivers, which carried nutrients to the forests, which fed the giants, whose waste fertilized the soil, which eventually washed into the sea to feed the plankton. It was a perfect circle, a balanced machine that ran without interruption for millions of years. But the most profound lesson of the Jurassic is not its stability, but its eventual end. No matter how perfect the balance, the Earth always moves on. The continents continued to drift. The climate began to shift. The Jurassic did not end with a bang, like the era of the dinosaurs eventually would, but with a slow fade. The world of the giants began to change, making way for the world of the flowers and the bees, and eventually the world of us. Let us sit for a moment in the presence of this ancient world. The sun is now high in the sky, and the heat is intense. The giants are quiet, resting in the shade of the great conifers. The world feels still, as if it is holding its breath. In this stillness, we can appreciate the sheer audacity of the Jurassic. It was a time when the Earth dared to be grand. It was a time when life was not afraid to take up space, to be loud, and to be magnificent. We are part of this story. We are the inheritors of this Earth, the beneficiaries of its ancient labor. When we look at the world today, we see the ghosts of the Jurassic everywhere. They are in the shape of the hills, in the composition of the soil, and in the very molecules of our bodies. The forgotten Earth is not a distant memory. It is our foundation. It is the soil from which we grew, and it is the tomb to which we will all eventually return. As we prepare to leave this ancient landscape, let us take one last look at the giants. See them as they were, not as monsters, but as living, breathing beings, as much a part of the Earth as we are. Feel the rhythm of their world. Hear the sound of the rain. Smell the resin and the salt. This is the Jurassic. This is our home in another time, in another form. It is a place of wonder, a place of mystery, and above all, a place of life. The investigation into the Jurassic climate reveals a fact that often baffles the modern mind. There were no polar ice caps. The world was so warm that temperate forests grew near the South Pole. This paradox, a world without ice, challenges our understanding of planetary physics. how could the Earth maintain such a high temperature without triggering a runaway greenhouse effect that would boil the oceans? The answer lies in the Earth's natural thermostat. The vast forests of the Jurassic were massive carbon sinks, pulling carbon dioxide out of the air and storing it in the wood and the soil. The oceans, too, absorbed vast amounts of heat and gas. The planet was a self-regulating system, a biological and geological partnership that kept the conditions for life within a narrow, livable range. It was a masterpiece of planetary engineering. Skeptics might argue that such a world would be plagued by constant, devastating storms fueled by the heat. While the Jurassic was certainly a time of great monsoons, the lack of a temperature difference between the poles and the equator meant that the global wind systems were actually more stable than they are today. The weather was predictable. The rains came when they were supposed to, and the sun shone with a constant, reliable intensity. This stability was the key to the success of the giants. They could plan their migrations, their nesting, and their feeding around a climate that did not change for thousands of years. It was a world of deep, rhythmic permanence. Consider the texture of a Jurassic egg. It is not smooth and fragile like a chicken's egg. It is leathery, tough, and textured like the skin of a reptile. It is buried in the warm, moist earth of a nesting colony, protected by the heat of decaying vegetation. Inside, a tiny miracle is taking place. A creature that will one day weigh 40 tons is currently no larger than a mouse. It is a vessel of pure potential, a link in a chain that stretches back to the beginning of time. When it hatches, it will emerge into a world that is ready for it, a world that has been prepared by millions of years of evolution. The nesting colonies were places of immense noise and activity. Thousands of giants would gather in the same spot year after year, their voices creating a cacophony that could be heard for miles. The ground would be trampled flat, the trees stripped of their leaves to build the nests. It was a scene of chaos and creation, a reminder that the Jurassic was not just a place of quiet forests, but also a place of social complexity and communal life. These animals were not solitary wanderers. They were part of a vast, interconnected society. As we watch the young hatchlings struggle toward the cover of the ferns, we are reminded of the fragility of life. Even in this age of power, the majority of those who were born would not survive to adulthood. They were the prey of smaller, faster predators, the victims of disease, and the casualties of the harsh environment. But enough survived. The system worked. The Jurassic was not about the individual. It was about the continuation of the line. It was about the endurance of the type. The more we study the Jurassic, the more we see the reflections of our own world. We see the same struggles for resources, the same responses to climate change, the same drive to innovate and adapt. The forgotten Earth is a mirror. It shows us what we are and what we might become. It teaches us about the resilience of life and the power of the planet to heal itself. It is a story of hope, written in the language of the rocks. We are reaching the end of our journey through the Jurassic morning. The sun is beginning its descent toward the western mountains, and the shadows are lengthening once again. The cycle is closing, but the story of the Jurassic does not end here. It continues in the Cretaceous, in the age of the mammals, and in the world we see outside our windows today. The Jurassic is not a closed book. It is a living chapter, still being read by the scientists who dig in the dirt and the dreamers who look at the stars. So, as the darkness returns to the ancient forest, let us carry the memory of the giants with us. Let us remember the weight of the air, the scent of the resin, and the sound of the rain. Let us remember that we are part of something vast and ancient, something that began long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. The Jurassic is a reminder that we are not the masters of the Earth. We are its guests, and it is a beautiful, mysterious, and wonderful home. The final paradox we must address is the unifying theory of the Jurassic. Why did it happen? Why did the Earth choose this specific moment to create such a world? The answer lies in the alignment of the stars, or rather, the alignment of the continents. The breaking of Pangaea was the catalyst. It created thousands of miles of new coastline, it opened up new ocean currents, and it released massive amounts of volcanic gases. It was a perfect storm of geological events that forced the Earth to reinvent itself. The Jurassic was not an accident. It was a consequence. It was the Earth's response to its own movement. This modern relevance is clear. We are currently living through another period of great geological and climatic change. We are shifting the continents in our own way, changing the chemistry of the atmosphere and the temperature of the oceans. By looking at how the Earth responded to the Jurassic transition, we can gain insights into our own future. We can see how life adapts, how the planet regulates itself, and what the costs of such a transition might be. The Jurassic is our roadmap. It is the history book that contains the secrets of our survival. In the end, the Jurassic is a story about time. It is about the immense, slow-moving clock of the universe, where a million years is but a second and a mountain range is but a ripple in the sand. It invites us to step out of our fast-paced, digital lives and into the slow, rhythmic flow of deep time. It asks us to consider our place in the grand design and to appreciate the fleeting, beautiful moment we have been given. The giants are gone, but their world remains. It is beneath our feet, in our fuel tanks, and in our imaginations. It is a part of us as much as we are a part of it. The forgotten Earth is not forgotten at all. It is waiting for us to listen, to feel, and to understand. It is the story of where we came from, and it is the promise of where we might go. Listen one last time to the sound of the Jurassic rain. It is the same rain that falls on you today. It is the same water that has been recycled through the bodies of dinosaurs, through the leaves of ancient ferns, and through the clouds of 1,000 different eras. It is the link that binds us to the giants. It is the voice of the Earth, speaking to us across the millions of years. And if you listen closely, you can hear it whispering the secrets of the past and the possibilities of the future. Sleep now with the weight of the ancient Earth pressing gently against you. Let the rhythm of the Jurassic heart soothe your mind. You are safe. You are part of the story. You are home. As the midday sun reaches its zenith, the heat becomes a physical weight, pressing down on the canopy and forcing the world into a temporary, humid lethargy. But in the shadows of the lower forest, where the light only arrives as a scattered mosaic of gold, a different kind of movement begins. We must now turn our attention to the great hunters of this era, the apex predators that maintain the balance of the Jurassic world. To understand them is to look past the modern image of the monster and to see them instead as masterpieces of biological precision. They were the anomalous engineers of the food chain, designed with a terrifying efficiency that allowed them to navigate a world of giants. Consider the skeleton of an Allosaurus, the lion of the Jurassic. Its bones are a marvel of structural integrity, built to withstand the immense forces generated by a multi-ton body in motion. But it is the skull that truly reveals the genius of this design. It is not a solid, heavy block of bone. Instead, it is a lightweight, open framework, a series of struts and arches that allowed for both strength and flexibility. When this predator struck its prey, the skull could expand slightly, absorbing the shock of the impact like a high-end suspension system. The teeth were not just simple spikes. They were serrated blades, curved backward to ensure that once a grip was established, there was no escape. This was not the work of a primitive lizard. This was a highly specialized tool for harvesting energy in a world of abundance. The hunt in the Jurassic was a slow-burn drama of patience and stealth. Imagine the Allosaurus standing perfectly still amidst a thicket of tree ferns. Its skin, mottled with shades of gray and olive, blends seamlessly with the shifting shadows of the forest floor. It does not pant. Its breathing is slow and shallow, barely disturbing the humid air. Its eyes, positioned on the sides of its head, provide a wide, panoramic view of the clearing. It is waiting for a specific moment, a lapse in the concentration of a young sauropod, a stumble in the mud, a separation from the safety of the herd. The predator is a creature of calculations, weighing the energy cost of a sprint against the potential reward of a kill. When the moment arrives, the explosion of movement is jarring. The silence of the forest is shattered by the thud of heavy feet hitting the damp earth. The Allosaurus does not roar like the creatures in a movie. It moves with a focused, hissing intensity. Its tail acts as a counterweight, allowing it to make sharp, agile turns through the maze of trunks. This is the paradox of the predator. How can something so large move with such grace? The answer is found in the tendons and muscles of the legs, which acted like massive springs, storing and releasing energy with every stride. The hunt is over in a matter of seconds, decided by a single, calculated strike to the neck or the flank. But even in the aftermath of the kill, the Jurassic reveals its complexity. The Allosaurus does not eat in peace. The scent of blood travels quickly through the humid air, drawing in scavengers from miles around. Smaller predators, the size of humans but with the speed of birds, circle the periphery, their movements jittery and expectant. In the trees above, the first protobirds watch with keen interest, waiting for their chance to descend on the scraps. The Jurassic was a world of constant recycling. The death of one giant was a feast for 1,000 smaller lives. It was the unifying theory of the ecosystem. Nothing was lost, only transformed. Let us sink deeper into the texture of the predator's world. Feel the heat radiating from the freshly turned earth where the struggle took place. Smell the iron in the air and the sharp, acidic scent of the forest reacting to the sudden violence. The ground is a chaos of trampled ferns and broken branches, the green leaves already beginning to wilt in the midday sun. This is the raw, unpolished reality of the forgotten earth. It is a world where beauty and brutality are inextricably linked, where every breath is earned and every life is a testament to the resilience of the planet. As we move away from the forest floor, we ascend toward the high plateaus, where the air is thinner and the wind has a sharper edge. Here, the Jurassic takes on a different character. The lush greenery of the lowlands is replaced by hardy, low-growing shrubs and vast fields of horsetails. The ground is rocky and unforgiving, scarred by the movement of ancient glaciers that had long since melted away. This is the domain of the master of the skies, the pterosaur. To see a Jurassic sky is to see a world of leather and wind. The pterosaurs of this time were not yet the giants they would become in later eras, but they were already the undisputed rulers of the air. Their wings were not made of feathers, but of a thin, remarkably strong membrane of skin and muscle, stretched over a single elongated finger. This membrane was not a simple sail. It was a living, sensing organ, filled with nerves and blood vessels that allowed the creature to feel the slightest change in air pressure. They could adjust the shape of their wings in mid-flight, reacting to the complex thermals rising from the warm stone of the plateaus. Watching a pterosaur launch itself into the air is to witness the ultimate defiance of gravity. They did not jump like birds. They used their powerful front limbs to vault themselves into the sky, a movement of incredible strength and coordination. Once airborne, they were transformed. They became shadows in the sun, gliding for hours on the rising heat of the afternoon. They were the eyes of the Jurassic, watching the movements of the herds below and the shifting patterns of the clouds. Their world was one of perspective and scale, a world where the boundaries of the land were visible and the vastness of the sea was a constant, shimmering presence on the horizon. The investigation of flight in the Jurassic often leads to skepticism regarding the durability of these skin wings. How could a creature survive a tear or a puncture in such a vital organ? The rebuttal lies in the regenerative power of the Jurassic biology. The membranes of the pterosaurs were capable of rapid healing, and the creatures themselves were highly skilled at avoiding the hazards of the forest. They were anomalous engineers of the atmosphere, finding the paths of least resistance through the heavy, humid air. They were a reminder that the Jurassic was not just a world of weight and earth, but also a world of lightness and grace. As the afternoon begins to wane, the shadows of the plateaus stretch across the lowlands, and a cool breeze begins to pull the mist from the valleys. We return to the forest, but our focus shifts to the smallest inhabitants of this world, the mammals. To look at the Jurassic through their eyes is to see a world of terrifying scale. A single step from a sauropod is like an earthquake. A falling branch is a catastrophe. These creatures, our distant ancestors, lived in a state of constant, heightened awareness. They moved through the leaf litter with a silent, twitching energy, their whiskers sensing the vibrations of the giants long before they appeared. These mammals were the hidden protagonists of the Jurassic story. While the dinosaurs claimed the sunlight and the open spaces, the mammals claimed the night and the interiors. They developed a sense of hearing and smell that far surpassed anything the giants possessed. They were the pioneers of the warm-blooded revolution, their bodies generating their own heat, allowing them to remain active even when the temperature dropped. They were the keepers of the future, waiting for the world to change, waiting for the giants to falter so that they could inherit the earth. The texture of the mammal's world is one of close-ups and hidden details. It is the feel of the rough bark of a fallen log, the cool dampness of a burrow, and the sharp, sweet taste of a Jurassic berry. It is a world of smells, the musk of a predator, the damp rot of the soil, the fragrant resin of the trees. To the mammals, the Jurassic was not a landscape of grand vistas, but a labyrinth of tunnels and secret paths. They lived in the cracks of the world, and in doing so, they found a way to survive that the giants never could. This leads us to a paradox of the Jurassic era. We often think of it as a time of stagnation, a long, unchanging period where the same creatures lived the same lives for millions of years. But the presence of these mammals and the rapid evolution of the first birds tells a different story. The Jurassic was a time of intense competition and innovation. It was a pressure cooker of life, where every organism was forced to find its niche or face extinction. The unifying theory of this period is one of diversification. The Earth was not just making things bigger, it was making them more complex. As the sun dips below the horizon, the Jurassic night begins to take hold. But this is not a night of darkness. In the humid air, the bioluminescence of the forest begins to glow. Fungi on the bark of the trees emit a soft, pale green light, creating a ghostly architecture in the darkness. Insects with glowing abdomens dance through the ferns, their lights reflecting in the damp leaves. It is a world of neon and shadow, a silent, glowing garden that only reveals itself when the sun is gone. For the giants, the night is a time of rest, but for the rest of the world, it is a time of intense activity. The predators of the night move with a silent, lethal grace, their large eyes capturing the faint light of the stars. The mammals emerge from their burrows, their nocturnal lives beginning in earnest. The forest is filled with the sounds of the night, the rustle of the leaf litter, the click of an insect, the distant, mournful cry of a pterosaur. It is a symphony of survival, a reminder that the Jurassic never truly slept. We must now consider the stakes of this nocturnal world. In the darkness, the rules of size are rewritten. A giant is vulnerable when it cannot see its attacker. A predator is at a disadvantage when it cannot find its prey. The night was the great equalizer of the Jurassic, a time when the anomalous engineering of the small and the fast proved its worth. It was in these dark hours that the foundations of the modern world were being laid, in the quiet, persistent lives of the creatures that would one day replace the giants. The sensory details of the Jurassic night are hypnotic. Feel the cool, damp air on your skin, the moisture clinging to your hair like a fine mist. Listen to the rhythmic pulse of the insects, a sound that seems to vibrate from the very earth itself. Smell the deep, earthy scent of the forest floor, intensified by the humidity and the darkness. This is the forgotten earth at its most intimate. It is a world that invites us to slow down, to listen, and to feel the ancient pulse of the planet. As we move toward the climax of our journey, we must look at the unifying theory of the Jurassic on a global scale. The breaking of Pangaea was not just a geological event, it was a biological one. As the continents moved apart, they created new environments and new challenges. The isolation of populations led to an explosion of diversity, as life adapted to the specific conditions of each new landmass. The Jurassic was the moment when the Earth became a world of many stories, rather than just one. This is the modern relevance of the Jurassic. We are living in a time of another great breaking. We are shifting the climate, the oceans, and the very structure of the ecosystem. By looking at the Jurassic, we can see how the Earth handles such transitions. We see the resilience of the system, the way that life finds a way to fill every gap and respond to every challenge. We see that change is not the end, but a beginning. The Jurassic reminds us that the Earth is a living, breathing entity, capable of reinventing itself in ways we can barely imagine. Let us sit in the glowing darkness of the Jurassic night for a moment longer. The stars above are the same ones we see today, but they are in different positions, a reminder of the vastness of time that separates us from this world. The Milky Way is a solid bridge of light, reaching across the sky and connecting the past to the present. In this silence, we can feel the connection. We are part of the same story. We are the inheritors of the Jurassic's labor, the beneficiaries of its ancient, glowing nights. The story of the Jurassic is not just a story of bones and stones. It is a story of energy, the energy of the sun, the energy of the earth, and the energy of life itself. It is a story of how that energy is captured, stored, and transformed across millions of years. When we look at the giants, we are looking at the peak of that energy cycle. When we look at the mammals, we are looking at its future. And when we look at ourselves, we are looking at its latest chapter. So we prepare for the dawn. The light will return, the mists will rise, and the giants will wake once again. The cycle will continue as it always has, but we carry with us the secrets of the night. We know the world of the small, the world of the glowing, and the world of the hidden. We know that the Jurassic was more than just a time of giants. It was a time of everything. Stay in this state of flow. Let the atmosphere of the ancient night settle over you. There is no rush to return to the modern world. The Jurassic is still here, in the rhythm of your breath and the warmth of your skin. It is the forgotten Earth, and it is waiting for you to remember. The investigation into the Jurassic night reveals a final, startling rebuttal to the idea of a simple world. The complexity of the nocturnal ecosystem suggests a level of evolutionary sophistication that we are only beginning to map. The interactions between bioluminescent fungi, nocturnal insects, and the first mammals were as intricate as anything we see in a modern rainforest. The Jurassic was a world of layers, each one built upon the other, creating a structure of immense depth and beauty. This is the so what of our journey. Why does the Jurassic matter? It matters because it shows us the potential of our planet. It shows us what happens when life is given the space and the time to truly flourish. It is a testament to the creativity of the Earth, a reminder that we live on a world that is capable of producing masterpieces of biological engineering. And it is a call to action, a call to protect and cherish the world we have now, so that future generations can look back at our era with the same sense of wonder that we feel for the Jurassic. As the first light of a new day begins to touch the horizon, we take one last look at the forgotten Earth. The giants are silhouettes against the growing light, their long necks reaching for the sky. The forest is waking up, the silence being replaced by the sounds of the morning. The cycle is beginning again, but we are different now. We have seen the Jurassic. We have felt its heat, smelled its resin, and heard its pulse. We are part of its memory. Sleep now with the light of the Jurassic stars in your mind. Let the glow of the ancient forest guide you into a deep, peaceful rest. The world is old, and it is wise, and it is beautiful, and you are a part of it. The story of the Jurassic is your story, and it is a story that never truly ends. In the final moments before the dawn fully breaks, we find ourselves standing on the edge of a vast, tranquil lagoon. The water is as still as glass, reflecting the deep oranges and purples of the sky. In the center of the lagoon, a family of long-necked giants is drinking, their movements slow and rhythmic. The sound of their drinking is a soft, steady lap, 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 a sound that has not changed in 150 million years. This is the peace of the Jurassic. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated existence, a moment that defies the passage of time. This lagoon is a microcosm of the entire era. It is a place of balance, of beauty, and of immense power. It is a place where the earth and the water and the life are all in perfect harmony. And it is a place that reminds us of the endurance of the forgotten earth. No matter what changes, no matter what extinctions occur, the earth remains, continues to breathe, to shift, and to create. So we leave the Jurassic here in the quiet light of the dawn. We leave the giants to their day and the mammals to their burrows. We leave the pterosaurs to the wind and the predators to the shadows. We carry their story with us, a treasure of deep time that we can revisit whenever we need to feel the pulse of the planet. The Jurassic is not a memory. It is a presence. It is the foundation of our world, and it is the inspiration for our future. Listen to the last of the night sounds as they fade into the morning. The world is waking up. The forgotten earth is becoming the modern earth. But for those who know how to listen, the giants are still there. They are in the wind, in the rain, and in the silence of the stones. They are waiting for us to remember, and now we do. The journey now takes us away from the solid ground of the continents and into the vast, warm embrace of the Jurassic oceans. To understand the scale of this era, one must look at the water. It was not the cold, blue expanse we recognize today. The seas of the Jurassic were a thick, mineral-rich soup, heavy with dissolved limestone and saturated with the warmth of 1,000 volcanic vents. In many places, the water was so shallow and so warm that it felt more like a salt marsh than an ocean. But beneath this shimmering surface lay an abyss of incredible complexity and terrifying power. This was the theater for some of the most specialized biological engineering the planet has ever produced. Imagine descending into the Tethys Sea. As you move away from the sun-drenched coral reefs, the light begins to fade into a deep, bruised indigo. The pressure increases, a heavy, silent weight that presses against the ears. The sound of the waves is replaced by the low-frequency thrumming of the Earth's crust, the groan of tectonic plates shifting, and the distant roar of underwater volcanoes. In this darkness, the masters of the deep move with a silent, terrifying grace. These are the pliosaurs, the undisputed titans of the Jurassic abyss. A pliosaur is not a fish, and it is not a whale. It is a reptile that has returned to the sea and conquered it through sheer, brute force. Its body is a streamlined mass of muscle, propelled by 4 massive flippers that move like wings through the water. But it is the head that commands attention. A pliosaur's skull can be 10 feet long, armed with teeth the size of daggers and a bite force that could crush a modern armored vehicle. To see one of these creatures move through the dim light of the deep ocean is to see a predator that has reached the absolute limit of what is biologically possible. They were the anomalous engineers of the current, using their massive size to maintain body heat in the cooler depths and their specialized senses to track prey through miles of dark water. The investigation of these marine giants often encounters a paradox. How could such massive, air-breathing reptiles stay submerged long enough to hunt in the deep? The rebuttal lies in the chemistry of their blood and the efficiency of their lungs. Like modern whales, they were capable of storing vast amounts of oxygen in their muscles, allowing them to remain underwater for incredible lengths of time. They were built for the long game, patrolling the borders between the light and the dark, waiting for a chance to strike at the schools of ammonites or the smaller ichthyosaurs that shared their world. The texture of the Jurassic Ocean is one of salt and silt. If you were to run your hand through the water, it would feel viscous, almost oily, due to the sheer density of the plankton and the microscopic life that fueled the entire system. The seafloor was a graveyard of shells, a thick carpet of white calcium that would eventually be compressed into the limestone cliffs of our modern coastlines. Every inch of the ocean was teeming with life, from the smallest glowing shrimp to the largest marine reptiles. It was a world of infinite layers, a vertical wilderness that stretched from the sunlit surface to the crushing darkness of the trenches. As we move toward the poles of the Jurassic world, we encounter the greatest geographical paradox of all. In our time, the poles are synonymous with ice, vast, white deserts of frozen water where only the hardiest life can survive. But in the Jurassic, the poles were green. There were no ice caps. Instead, there were vast, temperate forests of ferns and conifers that stretched to the very edges of the Earth. In the southern polar regions, the sun would disappear for months at a time, leaving the world in a long twilight winter. But it was a warm winter. The heavy atmosphere and the warm ocean currents acted like a global central heating system, carrying the heat of the equator to the very top and bottom of the planet. Imagine a forest in the Antarctic Jurassic. During the long night, the trees are silhouettes against a sky filled with the aurora australis, curtains of green and violet light that dance over a landscape of moss and stone. There is no snow on the branches. The air is cool, perhaps even chilly, but it never freezes. The life here has adapted to the paradox of darkness. The plants have developed large, broad leaves to capture every possible photon during the long summer days, and they go into a state of dormant rest during the dark winter. The animals, too, have adapted, developing large eyes to see in the twilight and thick layers of fat to store energy. This polar world was the carbon engine of the Jurassic. The vast amounts of vegetation that grew during the endless summer days would eventually die and be buried in the swamps, forming the massive coal seams that we mine today. This was the Earth's way of storing energy, of bottling the sunlight of a million years and tucking it away beneath the soil. It is a reminder that the Jurassic was not just a time of life, but a time of preparation. The world was building the reserves that would one day power the civilizations of the distant future. The transition from the middle to the late Jurassic was marked by a subtle but profound shift in the planet's atmosphere. The volcanoes that had been so active during the breaking of Pangaea began to settle, and the carbon levels in the air started to fluctuate. This led to a period of intense evolutionary experimentation. It was during this time that the first flowers began to appear. They were small, inconspicuous things at first, primitive blossoms that lacked the vibrant colors and scents of modern flowers, but they represented a revolution in biological engineering. The arrival of flowers meant the arrival of a new kind of relationship, the partnership between plants and insects. In the earlier Jurassic, Plants relied on the wind to carry their pollen, a wasteful and inefficient process. But with the advent of the flower, plants began to hire insects to do the work for them. They offered nectar as a reward for the service of pollination. This was the beginning of the unifying theory of coevolution, a process that would eventually transform the entire face of the planet. It was a move toward efficiency, toward a world where life was no longer just about scale, but about precision and cooperation. Let us sink into the texture of this transition. Feel the softness of the first petals, a new sensation in a world of hard needles and waxy leaves. Smell the faint, sweet scent of the first nectar, a smell that had never existed before in the history of the earth. This was the beginning of the modern world, the first step toward the meadows and gardens of our own time. The Jurassic was fading, not into death, but into a new and more complex form of life. The investigation of the late Jurassic reveals a growing skepticism about the long-term stability of the giant sauropods. As the climate began to change and the forests started to shift, these massive consumers found themselves under increasing pressure. They had reached the limits of their engineering. A creature that requires a ton of food a day is highly vulnerable to even the slightest change in the environment. The rebuttal to this is found in their sheer endurance. They did not vanish overnight. They continued to adapt, to migrate, and to find new ways to exist. But the tide was turning. The age of the giants was slowly giving way to the age of the specialists. We now reach the climax of our journey, the unifying theory of the Jurassic Earth. If we look at the period as a whole, we see a planet that was functioning as a single, integrated machine. The breaking of the continents was the movement of its limbs. The volcanoes were its breath. The oceans were its blood. And the giants were its ultimate expression of vitality. The Jurassic was a moment of peak metabolic activity for the Earth, a time when the planet was running at its highest possible temperature and its greatest biological capacity. The so what of the Jurassic is a lesson in planetary legacy. Every breath we take, every mile we drive, and every plastic object we touch is a piece of the Jurassic. We are living on the ruins of a golden age. The energy that the giants consumed, the sunlight that the ferns captured, and the carbon that the volcanoes released are all still here, circulating through our modern world. The Jurassic taught the Earth how to be diverse, how to be resilient, and how to manage a changing climate. It provided the blueprint for everything that followed. As we look toward the modern relevance of this era, we see that we are currently conducting our own experiment with the Earth's atmosphere. We are releasing the carbon that the Jurassic so carefully stored, effectively trying to recreate the greenhouse conditions of that ancient world. But we are doing it in a fraction of the time. The Jurassic transition took millions of years, giving life time to adapt and evolve. We are moving at a speed that the planet has rarely seen. By studying the forgotten Earth, we are not just looking at the past, we are looking at a potential future. We are seeing what the world looks like when the heat is turned up and the ice is gone. The philosophical outro of our story brings us back to the individual. In the face of such immense time and scale, it is easy to feel insignificant. What is a single human life compared to the 55 million years of the Jurassic? But the lesson of the giants is that every life matters. Every creature, from the smallest mammal in the leaf litter to the largest sauropod on the plains, played a role in the stability of the system. We are part of that same system. We are the current guardians of the carbon, the current watchers of the sky. Our story is inextricably linked to theirs. As the final light of our Jurassic documentary begins to dim, let the atmosphere of the ancient world settle into your bones. Feel the slow, rhythmic pulse of the planet. Imagine the giants standing in the twilight, their shadows stretching across a world that would one day become our own. They are not gone. They are just waiting in the stone. They are the foundation of our mountains and the energy in our veins. To the viewers of the Forgotten Earth, the call to action is simple: listen. Listen to the wind, listen to the rain, and listen to the stories that the earth is trying to tell you. We live on a planet with a long and magnificent memory. By remembering the Jurassic, we are honoring the heritage of our home. We are acknowledging that we are part of a deep, beautiful, and ongoing mystery. The Jurassic story is one of endurance. It is a story of how life takes the raw materials of a planet, the heat, the stone, the water, and turns them into something magnificent. It is a reminder that even in the face of tectonic shifts and volcanic eruptions, life finds a way to flourish. It is a story of hope, written in the strata of the globe. Stay in this state of flow. Let the sounds of the Jurassic night carry you into a deep and restful sleep. The giants are watching over you. The ancient forests are breathing for you. The world is old, and it is safe, and it is full of wonder. You are a part of the forgotten earth, and you will never be forgotten. The final sensory details of our journey are the softest. The sound of a single leaf falling in a silent forest. The smell of the earth after a long-forgotten rain. The feel of a smooth, water-worn stone that was once part of a Jurassic riverbed. These are the small, quiet connections that bind us to the past. They are the whispers of the giants, telling us that we are home. As the screen fades to black and the narration ends, let the silence be your guide. The journey is over, but the memory remains. The Jurassic is with you in the darkness and the quiet. It is the story of your world, the story of your planet, and the story of your life. Sleep now in the cradle of deep time. The earth is dreaming of giants, and you are part of the dream. To understand the true conclusion of the Jurassic, we must look at the silence that began to settle over the great inland basins. As the millions of years stacked upon one another like layers of sediment, the world did not suddenly end. It began to drift into a new state of being. This was the late Tithonian Age, the final chapter of the Jurassic, a time of long shadows and shifting winds. The great rift valleys that had birthed the emerald forests were now widening into true oceans. The moisture that had once been trapped in the heart of the continents began to migrate, leaving some areas to dry into vast, sun-baked plains while others were drowned by the rising tides of a warming world. The textures of this late period were different from the lush beginnings. The deep, vibrant jades of the early Jurassic were now flecked with the golds and russets of drying ferns. The air, though still warm, began to carry the scent of salt from much further inland. The giants were still there, but their paths were changing. They followed the receding rivers, their massive footprints baking into the mud until they were as hard as brick. If you were to walk through one of these late Jurassic floodplains, you would feel the heat radiating from the ground, a dry, pulsing heat that smelled of scorched minerals and ancient resin. The sound of the world was no longer just the drip of rain. It was the rattle of dry horsetails in the wind and the crunch of brittle vegetation beneath the feet of the wandering herds. Consider the investigation of the drying world. Skeptics often wonder how the ecosystem survived this shift in moisture. If the forests were the lungs of the Jurassic, what happened when those lungs began to struggle? The rebuttal is found in the resilience of the life that had been forged in the fire of the Triassic. The plants did not simply wither, they evolved. They developed deeper root systems, thicker waxy coatings on their leaves, and more efficient ways of storing water. The giants, too, became more migratory, moving thousands of miles in search of the seasonal rains. The Jurassic was not a static garden. It was a world in constant motion, a planet that was learning how to manage the transition from a unified supercontinent to a fragmented world of islands and archipelagos. In this period of change, we find the paradox of the stone. We look at the fossils of the late Jurassic and see bones that have been turned into opal, into agate, into pure crystal. This is the process of silicification, a slow molecular dance where the organic matter of the giant is replaced, atom by atom, by the minerals in the groundwater. It is a form of geological alchemy. The Earth takes the remains of the life it created and preserves them in the most durable form possible. When we touch a Jurassic fossil today, we are touching the result of a million-year-long conversation between the biological and the geological. The bone is gone, but the shape remains, held in a mineral grip that will outlast the mountains themselves. The scale of this erasure is difficult to comprehend. For every skeleton we find, a billion others have been ground into dust, washed into the sea, or melted back into the mantle of the earth. The Forgotten Earth is a story written on a chalkboard that is constantly being erased and rewritten. We are only seeing the faint ghosts of the words that were left behind. But in those ghosts, we find a unifying theory of endurance. Life does not need to be permanent to be significant. The Jurassic lasted for 55 million years, a span of time so vast that our own civilization represents only a microscopic fraction of it. The so what of this era is found in its sheer longevity. The giants did not fail. They succeeded on a scale that we can barely imagine. As the sun sets on the final days of the Jurassic, we must look at the legacy of the carbon. The atmosphere of this period was rich in carbon dioxide, a legacy of the volcanic activity that broke the continents apart. But the forests and the oceans were also massive storehouses for that carbon. When the ferns died and were buried in the swamps, they took that carbon with them, locking it away in the earth. This was the planet's way of regulating its own temperature, of preventing the greenhouse effect from becoming a runaway disaster. The coal and oil we use today are the bottled climate of the Jurassic. We are, in a very real sense, fueling our modern world with the breath of the giants. This connection is the modern relevance of our story. We are currently reversing the process that the Jurassic so carefully managed. We are digging up the stored carbon and releasing it back into the atmosphere, trying to recreate the heat and the humidity of the ancient world. But we are doing it without the massive, globe-spanning forests and the deep, stable oceans that the Jurassic used to keep itself in balance. We are playing with the thermostat of a house that we do not fully understand. By looking back at the Forgotten Earth, we can see the consequences of a world without ice, a world where the heat is the dominant force of nature. It is a vision of our potential future, written in the stone of the past. The climax of our journey brings us to the unifying theory of the flowering world. In the very last layers of the Jurassic strata, we find the faint microscopic evidence of a revolution. The first pollen grains that do not belong to conifers or cycads. The first evidence of the angiosperms, the flowering plants. This was the anomalous engineering that would eventually end the reign of the giants. Flowers allowed for a much faster, much more diverse way of life. They brought with them the pollinators, the bees, the butterflies, the birds. This was the beginning of the speed up of evolution. The Jurassic had been a time of slow, massive stability, but the world that was coming would be one of fast-paced change and intricate cooperation. The transition from the Jurassic to the Cretaceous was not a wall. It was a bridge. The giants did not all vanish. Many of them simply became something else. The small, feathered shadows in the undergrowth became the masters of the sky. The tiny, nervous mammals became the keepers of the night. The earth continued to breathe, shifting its weight as the Atlantic Ocean widened and the old continents drifted further apart. The Jurassic did not die. It dissolved into the next era, leaving behind a foundation of stone and energy that would support everything that came after. Let us sit now in the deep, quiet atmosphere of the Forgotten Earth as it draws to a close. The air is still, the humidity a heavy blanket over the land. The giants are quiet, their long necks resting in the cool shadows of the great ginkgos. The world feels like it is waiting, waiting for the next chapter, waiting for the light to change, waiting for the future to arrive. In this stillness, we can feel the profound continuity of life. We are not separate from this world. We are its latest expression. We are the consciousness of the earth, looking back at itself across the abyss of time. The philosophical outro of our story is a meditation on the nature of memory. To remember the Jurassic is to acknowledge our own mortality and the mortality of our species. It is to accept that we are part of a cycle that is far larger than ourselves. The giants were once the masters of the earth, just as we believe ourselves to be today. They were magnificent, they were powerful, and they were, in their own way, eternal. But they were also ephemeral, a single breath in the long life of the planet. By honoring their memory, we are honoring the process of life itself, the endless, beautiful, and terrifying journey of the forgotten earth. As the narration fades, let the sensory details of the Jurassic stay with you. The sound of the wind in the horsetails, the scent of the resin and the drying ferns, the weight of the humid air, the rhythm of the giant's breath. These are the threads that connect us to the past. They are the evidence that we are never truly alone, that we are supported by the labor and the lives of a billion years of history. The call to action is to look at the world with new eyes. When you see a bird in the sky, see the ghost of a pterosaur. When you feel the warmth of the sun, feel the energy that once fueled the growth of the giant conifers. When you touch the soil, remember that it is the dust of the giants. We live in a world that is haunted by the Jurassic, a world that is built on its bones and powered by its sun. To live with this awareness is to live with a sense of wonder and a sense of responsibility. We are the stewards of the forgotten earth, and its story is ours to keep. Sleep now in the deep rhythmic flow of time. Let the shadows of the giants move across your mind like clouds across a summer sky. There is no rush, no urgency. The earth has all the time in the world, and so do you. You are part of the long, beautiful dream of the planet. You are safe in the arms of the ancient world. You are home. The Jurassic is not a place you visit. It is a state of being. It is the realization that the world is much older, much stranger, and much more beautiful than we can possibly understand. It is the sound of a heart beating beneath the mountains. It is the smell of the rain before it hits the ground. It is the memory of a time when the earth was young and the giants walked the land. As the final light of the stars fades and the silence of the deep earth takes over, remember the lesson of the Jurassic. Life is unstoppable. It will find a way through the fire, through the ice, and through the long, dark nights of the soul. It will always return to the light. It will always find a way to grow, to bloom, and to soar. This is the promise of the forgotten earth, and it is a promise that will never be broken. Stay in this state of immersion. Let the hypnotic rhythm of the story carry you into the deep, dark spaces of the mind where the giants still roam. The journey is complete, but the story never ends. It is written in the stone, in the water, and in the very atoms of your being. You are the Jurassic. You are the forgotten earth, and you are magnificent. The investigation into the end of the Jurassic reveals a final, beautiful rebuttal to the idea of extinction as a failure. The fade was not an end, but a transformation. The giants left behind a world that was richer, more complex, and more prepared for the future than the one they had inherited from the Triassic. They were the architects of the modern world, the ones who laid the groundwork for the forests, the oceans, and the atmosphere that we rely on today. Their legacy is not just in the museums. It is in the very air we breathe. This is the unifying theory of the Jurassic, that the Earth is a single living organism and every era is a stage in its growth. The Jurassic was its adolescence, a time of rapid growth, of experimentation, and of immense energy. It was the moment when the planet truly discovered what it was capable of. And we are the witnesses to that discovery. We are the ones who have the privilege of looking back and saying, I see you, I remember you, and I thank you. As you drift into sleep, let the image of the Jurassic dawn be the last thing you see. The mist rising from the lagoon, the giants drinking in the silence, the first light touching the feathers of a proto-bird. It is a world of peace, of beauty, and of infinite possibility. It is the world that made you, and it is the world that will always be there, just beneath the surface, waiting for you to remember. Sleep now. The giants are resting. The earth is still. The story is told. You are part of the forgotten earth, and you are finally home.